Welcome back, y'all, to the Ohio River Valley. Today we'll be focusing on creating a historic neighborhood in our new city. This neighborhood will be characterized by wider streets used from road builder, tram lines to help move pedestrians around the neighborhood, as well as some of the older home assets we have available to us. I want the neighborhood to have a high walkability while also having good connections to downtown and the rest of the city. Streetcar suburbs were very prevalent in the Ohio River Valley. Pittsburgh, especially, still has technically streetcar suburbs going with it. Cincinnati even still has some light rail connections. Louisville, unfortunately, no longer has any of those connections after about, I want to say, the 50s, maybe. But the historical context is there, and I think geographically or terrain wise, it makes sense with how hilly these regions are. But we'll start today by getting a rough layout of how the grid will be going for the neighborhood. It needs to be wide enough specifically for the Chicago Flats assets with the parking in the back, so we'll have a lot of alleyways linking up these streets here. And then the main arterial will be characterized by two separate one-way streets with the tram line going down the middle of it to keep those connections separate. And we can't have a tram line without any trams, so I'm going to get those connections started here. I'm going to take the line through our downtown where we'll create a few stops along the way, specifically in the hearts of downtown, before it'll be carried out into the waterfront industrial district where I plan to have the depot. And what better asset to use for this than the refurbished tram depot? Look at that. It looks like a real old factory building that's been, updated to modern standards. This is going to fit perfectly in some of these smaller grids we have. And so it took a little bit to figure out where I wanted to place the asset. Before deciding on this spot right here, I feel like this is probably going to be the best location for trams to be introduced onto the streets, where we don't really have to worry too much about traffic exiting the interstate or merging onto the interstate. Sure, it's a main connection onto the arterial, but it'll just be a small line at an intersection, so I don't think that should affect traffic too much coming this way. Alright, and back into the downtown, we can see it's cutting right through, but I'm hoping the use of the trams will help alleviate some of the traffic here going forward. We're not going to place any lines through downtown yet. We're just going to focus on this neighborhood here, but it's there for the future. With the tram line in place, we can continue to build out the grid for the neighborhood here. I'm trying to follow the topography as best as possible around these hills, while also trying to maximize how much space we can actually use. Here, I decided this is actually the best spot for the cemetery. I felt like, with it being a historic neighborhood, it makes sense to have the cemetery here, as opposed to some ever-expanding downtown grid. And so this will be detailed out as the episode goes on. But I'm planning on taking up quite a lot of space with this, so it needs its own rather large flat area, and this is kind of on the side of the main neighborhood, so I think this will probably fit our needs the best. We're here in Louisville, where I'm taking a lot of the inspiration for this flatter part. This is one of the older neighborhoods just outside of downtown. You can see a lot of real old brick homes, a lot of Italianette style homes. And yeah, here we could see the carriageways in the back, and look at all the foliage around. It's absolutely covered in trees. You can see how large the grids are, so we're going to try to stick as close to this as possible. Slight deviations, but yeah, this is what I'm going for here. So to make my life easier with plopping down the buildings, because at this point I just can't stop doing that, it's a disease, I'll come through here and get all the alleys correct, make sure all of the lengths or the sizes of the grid work the best for a 1x5 asset specifically. I'll expand up this hill a little bit and do some terraforming along the way. I don't want to completely, just flatten out the hillside for this, nor do I really want to, have to work with a 90-degree angle of a hill. So, we'll do a little bit of terraforming up. Nothing too drastic. I would imagine this probably would have happened anyways with the construction of the homes, just making sure the lots were all, set correctly. This would be a good time to mention I'll do a lot of stuff off camera, mainly because at a certain point it will become repetitive of me just, building the same template of the neighborhood. So I felt like I didn't really need to show all of that. So if anything major changes in like how the neighborhood's gonna look, obviously I'm gonna show that. But a couple of these cuts you'll see some parts of the neighborhood have been expanded. But back to building the alleyways and the grids, you can see I want a few connections throughout. I don't want it to just be one connection in and out of the alleyway. That's probably a fire hazard and kind of a nuisance for anyone trying to get to their garage. All right, here's the grid for what we're looking to do today. It kind of looks like a large grid, but once we get detailing, adding, homes and trees, it really seems to shrink down a little bit. But I think it really does fit the vibe we're going with. And I'm purposely building it away from our downtown so that I kind of figure out how to transition from downtown into a more suburban part of the city. I think that'll be easier once I have the suburban part done. But I think now's a good time to enter a time lapse and just build out a block just to see how the rest of the neighborhood's gonna look. All right, and here is the finished product. As you can see, I placed down a lot of those mansions from the Northeast US pack there. Those Italian nets fit perfectly with the neighborhood. Large streets with street parking all around. A hefty amount of trees to kind of give it a nice canopy. And then amongst the Chicago flats, I'll be placing a few buildings here. A lot of them from PDX mods, some of them signature, some of them not, but just to mix it up, make sure it's not all just row homes here. And then I tried my hardest to make sure there's at least one commercial building for every block, just so that everybody has a corner store they can walk to pick up, food or drinks, whatever they need. Honestly, I could not have done this build without anarchy. The ability to place these trees on the grass median really gives it exactly what the neighborhood needs. Like, look at that. It would have looked a lot different had we not had this many trees around. So very thankful for that mod. And to stay proactive with citizens' needs, I'm going to place a police station roughly in the center of the neighborhood here, just so they can quickly respond to any calls. And I'll be placing this hospital asset from PDX mods. This thing is awesome. Look at it. I just wish I had the option of the helicopter pad on there or not. I would have preferred no helicopter pad in this particular instance, just with it being a historic neighborhood, but I couldn't resist. The thing looks awesome. I'm spending a little time getting the lane math correct. This is probably going to be a heavily trafficked street with the hospital right there, and it's cutting right through the neighborhood. So I'll increase those lanes there, and I'll fix up some of the traffic lights and crosswalks. Across the street from the hospital, I will be placing the Riverview apartments again. I could not help myself. These things are awesome. And I think some more affordable housing just across the street from a public amenity, it would make sense. Using Move It though, I want to shift these things way closer together, and I need to get some education in here, so I will place the Netherlands Elementary School just across the street, just outside our New Age renovation district. I'm planning where the tramline loop is gonna be. I'm thinking it would make a lot of sense to come through here and loop in by the hospital. So I'm gonna get those connections laid out now, after I fix my road builder road. I made all these roads with the sole purpose of them being used in the Streetcar Suburb, but I did not make these roads streetcar accessible, so that was, pretty smart move on my part. At the intersection by the hospital, I wanted to add another lane into the apartments because I feel like this is going to get a lot of traffic going in there, so I want to make sure it doesn't disrupt the flow of traffic as best as possible. But now with the road builder roads updated, I can actually get the loop started. I have this idea right here to cut through the middle of the neighborhood. In hindsight, I'm not really sure how I feel about this, so I might adjust it in the future. Back at the hospital intersection, I just feel like this intersection to the alleyway for the apartments was a little too narrow, so I widened that. And then I need to actually get the line connected through this intersection, and without any super node, it makes it a little tricky. I'm basically working with 3 nodes here, but I don't really know how I feel about using a super node here. Back at our main arterial for the neighborhood, it's where I'm going to make a little bit more density. This is going to be the main street, essentially, of the neighborhood. So we'll have some mixed use and some bigger apartments here. And now that we have a decent portion of the neighborhood built out, I think it's time to actually make some tram stops here. Now, obviously, a tram stop's not going to work on just a line on its own. So I'm going to go with this custom passenger track. It's pretty bare. It's just a functional track that I can go in and detail exactly how I want. It's not going to be anything fancy, but, it'll be nice, draw the attention. So I'm just going to delete some of the tracks there to make room for the station. Right at the intersection here, this is probably going to be the best spot for it, just from the school, the hospital, and some of these larger buildings. I'll also be placing another station on this line at the other end that we first started building. Here by the cemetery, I'll just do the exact same thing. I'll place down one of the bare station tracks so that we can go back and detail it how we want. You might have noticed I've not addressed this funky line here. It's because I planned on deleting it. I had a cool idea for it, but then I thought, well, that kind of defeats the whole purpose of the streetcar being able to, get as many stops as possible. So I'm just going to delete that, and then the tram line will be reconnected up this road here, where it'll eventually loop around to our left back into the line. Looking at this local highway connection, it's starting to get a lot more traffic on it, so I think it's time to expand it out to 6 lanes. I know, a lot of lanes, but it'll future-proof it a little bit. I'll come back to our 4-lane road and get a few more turning lanes in just to make sure traffic flows as easily as possible on this road. It's very important that we get this right, otherwise I feel like it's just going to gunk up the whole system. Coming back to the corner, I have the Eastern European Hotel. I place the Apollo Theater, and I expand the sidewalk on that side just to make sure there's no parking there, and I turn it into full concrete. I don't think there'd be grass under that awning. Jumping back to Chester Street and Copper Street, placing one of the Australian apartments. This thing looks awesome. It looks time period accurate, so I'm placing that there. That'll be the largest building in the neighborhood. Now it's time to spruce up the tram stations. I'm going to keep it pretty simple surface-wise. I wanted to have the sidewalk surface there, but I also want to have a brick accent to really draw the eye into the station, maybe make people think to use it. And I'm keeping the design very geometric, very simple. I'm not going too crazy with it, but I think it looks kind of nice. I'm gonna replicate that octagon on the other side, and then I'll go to the other track and replicate this there. Alright, now with the 2 stations done, I think it's time to put down some of the other stations around the downtown specifically, and then we'll get the line set up. I plan on having some stations every few blocks or so, specifically at points of interest that might be good, like the hospital, the parking garage, this shopping mall, and the planned square. here by this office in the church and this signature commercial building. Currently, I'm thinking we'll have two separate lines, one going through downtown and one going through the historic neighborhood and beyond. But now it's time to get the line set up, and also I'll place one down here too for industrial workers. Alright, so I'll just change the line color to blue to make it a little bit more recognizable, and I'll start with the first stop here, and I want to connect it to the one stop in downtown at least to get some kind of connection between the two planned lines. And I need a loop, so I'll put that there by that the media building, and then it'll just loop back around from the hospital. I'm sitting here thinking if I should make it another way, but I decide to just have it loop back around and connect to those three stops only for the time being. I've been looking at this church for a while now, and I just don't like the location of it. So I try to move it into the historic neighborhood, which I have named Historic Bakersfield. Let me know what you guys think of the name in the comments, but I think it sounds pretty okay. But ultimately, I feel like the cemetery and the church are somewhat affiliated, so I want to place them in close proximity to one another, and that parking lot can be shared between the two. I'm looking at the tram, and the solid colors just don't sit right with me, so I want to have a color scheme that would work for the entirety of the tram networks, at least with these specific models. And so to keep it simple, I'm just gonna do a red, white, and blue template. Make it a little darker, but I think it turns out nice. It's not just a solid bright blue color, so that's really my main focus. Yeah, look at that. Can you imagine just a little bit more trees, a little bit more people having that stroll by? But let's see, we're at the hospital station here. I'm curious to see how it's performing. One thing I noticed was the people were standing in the gravel, so I just adjust these surfaces to at least make it look like they're standing on concrete and not, getting rocks in their shoes. But I think for just a few services, the station looks nice. I'm gonna go back and detail it up just a little bit further, but I think it looks nice for what it really is. And I know giant metallic rings aren't exactly historic, but I'm imagining the tram line was probably in trouble at some point, and in order to get the funding to revitalize the network, they probably had to accept some kind of compromise, which let the people modernize the stations and also, just breathe a little bit new life into the city in general. So using the rings, which I think are Chinese props, and then some of the city station props, or are those the skyscraper props? I can't tell. One of the newer DLCs. I'll detail it up just a little bit. I'm not, like I said, nothing too crazy, but just a place for people to sit while they're waiting, have some trash cans so they're not littering. And look at that, people are already flocking to the station. I think it looks pretty good. It seems to be performing pretty good too. It looks like we have 46 people waiting. Average wait time is a minute, so not too great, but it's okay. And unfortunately, I'm really bad at making the camera nice for people watching, but this station's performing a lot worse. 2 people waiting, 70 seconds on wait time. But I'm hoping that'll change with some increased connectivity with the sidewalks from the cemetery. I'm imagining this is probably a really important connection for the cemetery for people to visit their loved ones who have passed on, go to church, just general proximity from the neighborhoods to the right side. Revisiting the 4-lane road again. I didn't really like how the traffic was sitting here. I think it would make more sense if I upgraded that whole section there to 3 and 2, and then I add a slip lane Also, the node here is just funky. The connection is all off, so I try to widen that a little bit. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drop this 6-lane leading into the intersection into a 5-lane with a slip lane turning right. A little bit of funky road connections. I'll just delete that segment there. And I actually turn it into a 4-lane. I am not very good at predicting the future. But I'll remove some of these traffic lights and crosswalks as there's just way too many there. We only really need the one at the 4-lane intersection. I'll widen the nodes as much as possible, straighten out the slip lane just a little bit. And then because I removed some of those traffic lights, I want to come back to the slip lane and just make sure they have a stop sign. Everything else is okay. I want to make sure they can't turn left. That wouldn't make sense. And then look at how these people are parking. I don't like that. So I'm going to remove the parking capabilities on this intersection. And that's looking much better. Oh, and then I switch it to a 5-lane. So I can tell the future just inaccurately. Back at Copperfield Street, what I originally called Copper Street, I'll place down a few more buildings here. Like I said, nothing too crazy. I just want to have a little bit of a Main Street vibe going on. And I placed down this signature building. I think it's a diamond store from PDX Mods. I can't remember the name right now, but I like that building a lot. And then I placed down a pub. I think it's nothing crazy here, but it gives some more businesses in the area, makes it a little bit of a hub for the neighborhood. So can't really complain too much. Except for the fact that I have a driveway that has to drive over a grass sidewalk, so I'm just gonna use one of the custom concrete surfaces. That makes it way better. I don't know, I wish there was some way for the game to recognize where a driveway was and immediately pull in a curb around the sidewalk. I don't know how that would work. I placed a German high school on this hill. I'm not really liking how it digs into the terrain, so I'll switch that out in the future. But what I do like is this old post office asset. I think it fits the area pretty great. And I have not shown you guys any parking lots recently, and so that needs to be remedied right now. With the space we have, I figure I could use a parking lot road, and then I'll use Move It to kind of shift them all into place and drag them out just to get a little bit more parking spaces. Like, look at that. I'll just hide the nub under the sidewalk too. I think that works pretty good. I'll place down a few trees around it to hide the parking lot and continue the tree canopy we have for the neighborhood. And then just to make it a little bit different, I'm gonna add a little bit of landscaping and surfaces around the back side of this apartment building. I think it looks nice, and whoever owns it or manages it would probably take great care in this historic building. I'll apply another concrete surface to the entire parking lot just to make it look as cohesive as possible and give it a different look than the rest of the street. I think it helps break up the monotony of the gray asphalt. But we still have a problem of a lot of plain surface here that I think I'm going to remedy with some of these planter curbs, or I guess it's just a curb. But I think these will really help. I can place some trees in them and break up the concrete surface as well. And then of course I come back through with some decals just to make the parking lot look run down. I can't help myself. I just love it. No new parking lots here ever, only rundown parking lots. And there we have it, a rundown parking lot. Hopefully that fixes your parking lot withdrawal. I know it fixed mine. Alright, so I've done a little bit of work off camera with some housing up the hill. And I feel like I've been talking your guys' ears off this entire episode. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to let y'all listen to some music and watch as I detail out a little bit of the cemetery. It's a real sizable portion of the neighborhood by the end of it. Alright, and it's finally done. I tried to add a good mix of places for urns as well as tombstones. And you can see that back corner is empty. That's intentional. I feel like it's probably spaces for new plots of burial sites. With the cemetery completed, let's refocus our attention on finishing the tramline loop around this part of the neighborhood. So just past the post office and that high school, I want to put a stop up here next to the church. And I'll also put one in between the two, just so that we have somewhat of a 2 block radius for anybody wanting to get on the tram. Also, you might notice this back corner doesn't have any stops. I figure I'll just add those in later as we continue to build out the neighborhoods around the city. We can see here multiple people leaving the station. I'm hoping it's from just getting dropped off by a tram and not a tram not picking them up. But that'll complete the build for today. Like I said, a lot of this was done off camera, but I just felt like it would get a little repetitive if you guys just watched me keep placing the same buildings down over and over again. And so I built out a section of it, and then I kind of showed you all the other cool stuff I had going on. So the neighborhood's not complete. I haven't really detailed out any of the churches, and I want to replace that high school. But we will get to all of that as we continue on in the series and further expand up the hill into the inner city and around. But with that, I want to thank you all so much for watching today. Really appreciate it. If you like what you saw here, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. Also, leave a comment on what you like, what you don't like, and I'll take a look at it and implement your suggestions. And with that, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm going to leave you with some cinematics, and I hope you all have a good one.